think the number has stabilized. Oh. Hi, everyone. We're glad that you can join us today. Welcome to the CMF webcast regarding the CMF Sector Development Program. I am here and super pleased to introduce the Growth and Inclusion team. So I am Marcia Douglas, the VP of Growth and Inclusion, and joining us today are Jessica Lee Fleming, the Director of Growth and Inclusion, and not joining us, but soon, Emily Skogard, Manager of Sector Development. They're not available to join us today, but they manage our Sector Development Program. Also joining us is Gaëlle Assou, the editor of Now and Next, and also the Growth and Inclusion French Market Liaison. And we also want to thank Emmanuel and Catherine for all of their support and tech wizardry today. Before we begin, we want to take a moment to acknowledge these Indigenous lands. In recognition of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people on whose land we reside, we acknowledge the important and unique role of Indigenous peoples in the past, present, and future generations as stewards of the lands and waters. As of February 2023, there are currently 32 long-term drinking water advisories in effect in 20 Indigenous communities. I am currently in Takaronto, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Takaronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. These treaties and other agreements, including the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, are agreements to peaceably share and care for the land and its resources. And other Indigenous nations, Europeans, and newcomers have been invited into these covenants in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. Many of us have come as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation and in generations past. And we also acknowledge those who have come here forcibly, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Therefore, we honor and pay tribute to those with ancestors of African origin and descent. We are mindful of broken covenants, and we strive to make this right with the land and with each other. Jessica?
Thanks, Marcia. So I'm just going to go over some quick housekeeping to prepare us for today. To let everyone know, today's webcast will be recorded. There is CART transcription available. There are actually two options. So if anyone is interested in captions, you can check the bottom of your screen, and there's an option to turn on the captions. Alternatively, we're going to put a link in the chat, which will open to a separate browser and provide stream text captioning. So two ways to access this if you would like. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function to type in your questions. We may not get to every question today, but we're going to try. If your questions are not addressed today, feel free to email industries@cmf-fmc.ca. Same word in English and French, industries or industrie. Also a reminder that the guidelines and application portal are linked on the CMF webpage. And I'll pass it back to Marcia no, sorry, that's not right. I'm going to begin the presentation and then I'll hand it to Marcia. So sorry, we're keeping nimble on our toes today. So for the beginning of the deck, here we are reviewing sector development for 2023-2024. Thank you again for joining us. A reminder and an overview of the program. So the sector development program supports Canadian nonprofit organizations to create and deliver programs and initiatives which aim to support the growth of our Canadian audiovisual sector. We're looking at initiatives that create a more inclusive sector, that address industry gaps in a distinct and identified way, specific way. We are also, as many of you have heard before, interested in tangible benefits for multiple members of the screen-based sector. So a project cannot primarily benefit any one creator or company. I'll go to the next slide. For eligibility criteria, applicants must be a nonprofit Canadian organization. The areas of focus this year are capacity building and or market access. They must support the CMF ecosystem, be project-based in funding, and we have some persona ID requirements. So what that means is, in order to apply to sector development, you must have a completed persona ID. It's a necessity to be eligible for the program, and that means program managers, stewards, or directors of the initiative who are running or managing the project, so whoever's running it in a substantial way. Additionally, 51% of the board of directors must have a completed persona ID. So it's simple, it's straightforward, it's an anonymous process, and really this comes down to giving the CMF the capacity to monitor project ownership, program impact, and to collect greater understanding of the industry we're all working in. I'll also just add a quick note about the nonprofit requirement, which is we do allow individuals or different organizations, collectives, to come in as long as the lead applicant is a nonprofit Canadian organization. So there is some flexibility there. That's a question we often get. So just to clarify, the lead applicant must be a nonprofit Canadian organization, but there is some flexibility in how that might work. And that's in place to try to create more access points for a variety of communities and people. Go to the next slide. Funding. So applicants can apply for a maximum of $50,000 for regional, provincial, or territorial, and up to $100,000 for nationally scoped projects. When we say national scope, we mean participants must be from at least 3 provinces or territories, and 50% of the participants must be from outside the host province. So really looking at a wide range of impact and participation. The CMF will cover 75% of the project costs, and admin costs are capped at 15%. We do consider in-kind contributions, but cash contributions are scored higher. As I mentioned briefly before, for 2023-24, the focus of the sector development program will be capacity building and market access. And a reminder that sector development is not in place to support content. If you have series or interactive digital media, including web series, that is all to be directed to our programs that are for content-specific initiatives and projects. Go to the next slide. Just a quick overview of the process. So the first step is to submit a letter of intent. We time that submission deadline to be about 6 weeks out from the application deadline. So right now we're approaching the first letter of intent intake for May 5th, 2023. Following receipt of your letter of intent, there will be a discussion with the CMF sector development team. So either the manager or one of us team members. If the letter of intent is well received, then you are invited to apply through the sector development portal to submit a full application. Applicants are notified of decisions 10 weeks following the application deadline, and decisions are final. Successful applicants receive the agreement within 30 days. Just a couple of details on the letter of intent. We ask that you aim for a 1-page letter of intent and to keep your font size reasonable. So around 10 points is ideal, as these are read by multiple members of our team. We don't accept multiple letters of intent, so you can't submit for 4 projects at this stage. If you submit more than 1 letter of intent, we will go back to you and say, can you please identify your project, select one initiative you'd like to put forward at this time. We are also not, unfortunately, able to provide templates, but there are plenty of templates available on open source software online. And I think, given that we are a little bit tight on time, I'm going to pass this back to Marcia to take over for the rest of the presentation.
And then we'll take questions.
And then we'll take questions.
Yeah. So a little more detail on capacity building. So I think one other piece is our sector development program is to support projects and communities in the audiovisual space, but it's quite broad. So when we talk about capacity building, We're talking about things like training, potentially skills upgrades, potentially mentorship, career advancement. So orgs applying to and some examples of capacity building of things we found in the past, for example, can be a producer training program for mid-career BIPOC professionals to help them be more co-production ready. Or we funded a training program to help build workforce expertise for regional production in advanced XR or virtual production technology and production processes. And it might be helpful to note that we do publish the projects or the initiatives that have received sector development funding, either on the CMF website or in our annual report. So that's a good way to look at the kinds of projects or the kinds of organizations that have been successful in the past. Next slide. So the other element that Jessica mentioned was market access. So in our market access stream, we're really looking at an emphasis on curated B2B activities. That can be for local markets in Canada or for international markets, but we're really looking then for places where there's either curated buyer sessions or market readiness. Some of our examples in the past have included a B2B program for emerging professionals to pitch their projects to a series of qualified buyers and decision makers, or even to support for export delegations to attend international markets. Really, it can be quite broad. It can be for the creators. We would potentially even look at opportunities that would really foster more interaction with distributors, broadcasters, co-production opportunities, or other financing. Next slide, please. So more on a project by project basis, we want to share that we're going to have 2 drawdowns here. So 75% on execution of the agreement, which there may be some deliverables that we ask for back and forth before you get to that point. And then 25% on your final report and deliverables. And some things to note is we do recognize that projects may change and evolve from the original concept. We just want to be kept in the loop so that we can continue to help make sure it stays on side and is attaining the goals and objectives of why we supported the project. So keep in touch with us and especially Emily, so that is okay. We not expect, but we fully understand that projects change, especially as they're being developed or as you're working with communities. If there's a significant change that would be more than 15% of your budget or significant change in timeline, we may want to just make sure that you have written approval from us, just to ensure, as we said, that project remains eligible and is supporting the initiatives and goals of the program. But we will work with you to try to make sure that this project remains on track and to support you in attaining the goals that you are hoping to achieve. Ideally, we are looking for projects that are wrapped within a year, and because we are hoping to be able to allow you or allow those initiatives to potentially apply again if it makes sense for that project and if it makes sense for the goals of the sector development program at that time. Next slide, please. So key terms to sort of keep in mind in terms of when you're developing a project, that it's needs-based so that you can really identify that industry gap and that you have evidence to demonstrate that specific and tangible need, that you're strategic. So the projects, I think Jessica sort of mentioned this earlier, but we want to see projects that have a direct tie to the community that they're proposing to serve, and that the organizational goals should align. And then we want measurable and impact-focused proposals. So we need you to be able to articulate what the intended outcome is, and that has a measurable impact that we can ideally see, or at least be able to measure its outcome at the end. So one of the examples that we've used in the past is if you look at Forbes, and we can put the link in the chat, actually, we'll put it up, but using that SMART goals methodology, where they are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-based objectives and outcomes from your project. For example, we will, the proposal is that you will take 10 people and they will complete these 6 courses, which may result in 5 key learnings, 3 business connections through this, and 1 additional business opportunity. Something along those lines. Different numbers, whatever makes sense for your project. But we're really open to new experiences, new opportunities. We just need to understand how your organization will be curating and supporting projects, and they really need to be more than just simple networking. So last slide. So thank you for joining us. We put the email up here and it's in the link, but please reach out if you have any questions or if you want to talk something through, especially if you want to talk through project specific or organizational specific questions. Our CMF website also has a lot more information about the content funding, previously funded projects. We put some of the links in the chat, but you'll see links to, for example, more information about persona ID that was mentioned earlier. The application portal for sector development itself will be open shortly. And a reminder actually that if you require assistance or accommodation in applying for any CMF programs, including sector development or in completing persona ID, we do have an accessibility support program. So we will also put that link in the chat, or you can email us at access@cmf-fmc.ca. And I think we can now look to our questions.
We have one question. I'm not able to turn my video back on, sorry. We have a question. Are newly established nonprofits without a board of directors eligible? I would be curious to understand where the nonprofit is incorporated, because I believe in Ontario it's a requirement to have a board of directors in order to be incorporated. I'm not sure about other provinces, but that might be worth looking into. As far as the duration or the time since the organization has been established, there's no requirement. It's if you established 6 months ago, you're more than welcome to apply. We've also had questions in the past about, do we have to have been in operation for 3 years or 10 years? It doesn't matter. As long as you are a nonprofit, Canadian nonprofit organization, you're eligible. Just make sure you get your persona ID completed. We don't have any other questions at this time in the chat. Oh, okay, here they come. The cost of contract staff to admin is the cost of contract staff to administer the program eligible? Marcia, do you want to answer that?
The answer would generally be yes, but I will remind that we have an overall cap of 15% on admin as part of your proposal. But if it is a separate person that's separately listed out, then you would put in your budget proposal that role and the amount, and then we would be looking at what is reasonable for the project, and but we would consider that eligible for sure.
Okay, so another question, can you clarify if the participants from 3 provinces stated in the funding is new this year? It's not new this year. Any nationally scoped project requires participants from 3 territories or provinces. That's not been changed this year. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say there's a question about, can an application be both for capacity building and market access, I think you mean, or just one? And I would say, but Jessica will correct me if I'm wrong, that sure, it really depends on what it is. But if you look at your applications you're building out, it's probably more likely one than the other. But it isn't to say that it can only be one or the other. It's what makes sense for the project or initiative.
Mm-hmm. Typically what we see is that there will be more focus on one area, and then there can be some considerations that would be considered market access, for example, as part of a follow-up or something like that. But usually if the project is soundly designed, it will have it will be more heavily weighted in one or the other is mostly what we notice.
I'll ask you the questions, Jessica.
Sure.
Is a budget proposal required in the letter of intent?
No, a budget proposal is not required in the letter of intent. Some people find it helpful to give a sense of what they expect the project to cost, but it's not a requirement.
And the next one is, can you speak more to an example of a collective? For example, does a not-for-profit need to be specific to the media sector, or can it be community-based?
So I think this is where it really depends on your project. This is, and I would actually point to some of the work that Marcia mentioned around narrative positioning. Does it make, what's making sense for the project? If you are you know, a collective of women identifying people who are trying to develop a video game, and you want to partner with, you know, a Black-led nonprofit organization because you're trying to create an intersection there. It can make sense as long as it's supporting and strengthening the project, and not because your friend runs this nonprofit and you have a collective, and therefore in order to be eligible you want to submit together. So think through the relationship to the project. Does the relationship strengthen the proposal, and is this organization the best suited and best positioned to deliver on the work you're proposing?
Can I also add that you don't necessarily need to be in the media sector,
Yeah.
but we'll look at your ability to deliver on the program that you're proposing, and the initiatives or what you're proposing does need to be related to the media sector and the kinds of things that the CMF supports more broadly as part of the CMF. Oh, someone very helpful has shared that you usually, for a federally incorporated charity, need a minimum of 3 board members. But again, for anyone on this webcast, if you have a specific question about your specific structure of your organization, please reach out to us and we can speak more directly about that. Jessica, what is considered a participant in terms of involvement? So I guess what kind of people would be served in the initiatives?
Yeah, exactly. So who is going to be participating? Which people? The people who are coming. That's what we mean by participant.
Yes. Are programs for youth of BIPOC backgrounds to learn skills for creative development at early stages to be considered? For example, teaching film. I can start that and you can pick up, Jessica. The main focus is more at a professional level and not at a student level.
Mm-hmm.
It would depend on the program that's being proposed, but programs that are specifically targeting youth only that are more student-based would likely not be eligible, but you might want to reach out to us to talk about that again. Jessica, does this need to be a newly developed project, or can it be something that has been successfully run before, but maybe without CMF funding?
You can submit something that has run before as long as it's eligible within the criteria of the program. Usually we like to see programs iterating, so changing or evolving, expanding. Not expanding doesn't necessarily mean number of people participating, but how are you applying the learnings from the past to a revision of the program you're running again, as for a second time or third time. So it doesn't preclude you from applying to CMF. I would just say to ensure that you are showing and demonstrating reflection on the project, the program, the failures and the successes, and why in its version currently it's suitable to the CMF at this time.
Okay, I think that's all the questions.
Yeah, I think so.
So please reach out to us if you have more questions. There are 2 deadlines. I think, Jessica, you pointed that earlier on the slide. So the first one is coming up shortly, but there's another one in the fall if you aren't quite ready with your project just yet.
And remember, you can always email us industry or industry@cmf-fmc.ca. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.